All right, I'm a little bit nervous. I've got Tia Levings with me. So, Tia, I've been like hunting you down for like over a year and a half to get you on my podcast. I'm so grateful to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, I had heard you on the podcast. I forget the name of it. It's Culture Study,
hmm
and
Peterson.
Helen Peterson. And I remember my jaw being on the floor when you shared about your story and that you are the best-selling author of the book A Well-Trained Wife.
hmm
And my jaw was on the floor. And I remember you saying that there is an open secret in Christian fundamental households that is full of abuse
Yes.
and abuse towards women. Yeah, generally towards women. And I remember being skeptical and skeptical not at you and not at your story, but
hmm
skeptical of, is this the particular lens that you see life through? And then as I started to peel the layers back, I realized there's so much more to the story.
Yeah.
Tia, would you start at the beginning and share a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So A Well-Trained Wife is my memoir of escape, but it starts, I open with my childhood, which is not usually a place where a memoir begins, with a little snip at the beginning of my story where I go into how it was a mainstream Christian upbringing that many people will be able to relate to, especially Gen Xers and older millennials, where my parents just took me to church because it was the thing that you do. And it was a very normal experience as far as mainstream America. We'll use that word for normal. And it was positive, and I had lots of other things in my life and self development. And I started my book there because the rest of my journey is indoctrination and a careful funnel towards higher and higher controlled religion. And I think I survived it because of that window as a child. So what the gist of the story is that my parents moved to Jacksonville, Florida when I was 10, and we joined a megachurch, a Southern Baptist megachurch with a pastor who was the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. I say that because it was not a fringe experience. I was very much in mainstream evangelical America, and
Yeah.
that became more nationalist and fundamentalist as I grew up. It was infiltrated by Bill Gothard's Institute of Basic Life Principles, the IBLP, which is the group that was exposed with season 1 of Shiny Happy People, which is a lot of people know my work from that. I got married to who I believed was God's best for my life because he said he was God's best for my life. And I was groomed at that point to not argue with men and what they say. And so I married him. I retrofitted my dreams onto him, and I became a quiverfull wife. And we were in the quiverfull Tradwife ideology.
What does quiverful mean?
Quiverful means you're going to have as many babies as possible. It comes from a verse in Jacksonville. It comes from a verse in the Bible that's children are like arrows unto the Lord. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. And the idea is that if you're going to have a war, you want to have as many arrows as possible. So in a culture war, you want to have as many children as possible because the idea goes is that your children are not going to depart from the way you raise them, and you'll be able to take dominion and have dominance in the culture through population. We don't,
We're
it doesn't really
seeing
manifest that
parallels right
way,
now.
but
Yeah, we're
yes, you
seeing
are seeing
parallels right now.
parallels.
Okay,
The
continue.
Tradwife movement that I was a part of in the 90s has come to manifest now. So, whereas A Well-Trained Wife, when I first started marketing it and selling it, it seemed like I was part of a fringe movement. And a lot of my conversations were about convincing people that this was in the mainstream. In the past 3 or 4 years, now it is here. We are here in the manifestation of it. And it's a lot more obvious that this is not in the fringe. I never have that conversation anymore. Now it's in our everyday.
Wow. As I'm thinking about where we are today and having this, I'm trying to do math, like 30
hmm
years
Yeah.
of grooming, of infiltrating this.
hmm
I think that the way that you position this is that all of this has been hiding in plain sight.
Yes, I call it a cult within a cult and cult within the mainstream because we were the neighbors next door, and nobody knew what we were doing. We just looked like maybe a little strange, a little conservative, but we weren't like on a compound, an ensconced cult. I grew up thinking a cult was Jim Jones and Kool-Aid, and
Yeah.
that's not what we're in anymore. We have cult group like think everywhere around us all the time now. So yeah, it was a very careful, patient strategy to make America a Christian nation and manifest Christian nationalism in tradwife and complementarian roles. And that is what has come to pass. They successfully brought us to this point, and that's the tension that we find our country in.
The way that you write, Tia, is so visceral, like you could feel it.
Mm.
You know, you said a line in your book that said, hitting me was no longer taboo. It was holy.
Mhm.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
they justify physical violence as the way you train or become more spiritual, the way you develop your godliness. Punishment is supposed to be severe and to an end. Like, they have a lot of spiritual rationalizations for it. So once you enter that mindset of, I can hit someone and it's for their good, and especially it's for their spiritual good, you are in another dimension than mainstream cultural, psychologically aware America, that we know the research on spanking and hitting, and it's disregarded in these circles.
I have to understand though, like, is this a certain faction of Christian fundamentalism? Is it normalized? Like you even said in your book, wife spanking was kink in church clothes. Oh my God.
Right. Well, so and yeah, I mean,
What
it's
line?
non-consensual BDSM. I did as wife spanking, which was also called Christian domestic discipline, was introduced to me. This came after theologian Doug Wilson, who is still very prominent theologian today. He has a concept called federal marriage, and federal marriage teaches that men will be spiritually responsible for everything that happens in their homes, and that includes their wife's behavior and thoughts and deeds. And so, since he's going to answer to God for the way that she behaves, he has to keep her in line. So in the book, I talk about how women, swap recipes and we swap ideas for homekeeping. The men are swapping ideas on how to be federal husbands, how to run their homes, how to get their wives to comply. And you'll hear a lot of open conversation about submissive women and women should obey their husbands. And what you don't hear is, what happens if she won't? What are you going to do about it if she will not submit to you? Well, they have a way. There's a way, but it's all behind closed doors, and most people will not talk about it. And when I started my memoir, I didn't think I would talk about it. It was my most shameful secret. I did not think I would bring it up and expose it, and it turns out I couldn't not. Like, it was too central to the degradation and process that led to the climatic ending of my story there. So Christian domestic discipline is non-consensual BDSM, and that is how I think about it today, and that is how I started to think about it even as I was trying to make sense of it at the time. I didn't have any vocabulary for that, and I didn't have any exposure to the world, so I didn't know what to call it. I just knew that it wasn't okay to do to an adult woman.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't okay to do to children, but they, again, have rationalizations for everything. And in the book, I try to make a case, I hope I'm successful doing so, is that it was a way to control random violence and to actually keep us safer through cooperation and fawning and people pleasing, was all an attempt to stay safe.
There are a few themes that came up in your book that really, really stuck out to me that I think have really mirrored ties to even more of a mainstream thing.
Hmm.
Like I think about me, I'm exactly your age. I'm 50. I think we're born the same year. Um, and I remember growing up in a, like we went to church kind of like you started out, but not
Hmm.
in a conservative or, devout kind of way. But I remember like wanting so badly to be a good girl, to be a desirable, not necessarily good, but like a pleasing woman, right?
Hmm.
Like that's what you're taught. As a woman growing up in the 90s and the 80s, 90s, you're taught to be picked.
Right.
And what I kept noticing about yours is that you had this period where you were so desperate to be chosen because people around you were telling you, Tia, don't do that. Don't speak up. Nobody is going to marry you. Nobody is going to marry you unless you behave in this
Hmm.
certain way.
Right.
And I think the other thing that as you kind of unfolded the stories through your marriage, the thought of like, it must be my fault. It is always my fault.
Uh,
And I think that ties to us as well of like, I don't know if it is our control or the way we were conditioning, but I wanted to understand from your perspective how
mhm.
that ties back to like the culture at large and then in the microcosm of your family life and of your church life of what that was like.
Yeah, in high school, I was riding two lives. I was going to a public high school, and my natural bends and talents and aspirations were honed and developed there. And then at church, I was narrowing down into this one outcome. You can have one way of being, which is a Christian wife and mother, And in order to be a Christian wife and mother, you have to be picked by a man, and he has to like you, and you have to be all the things that are pleasing into this uniform box. It's very, very uniform. And there was only one way to do it. And I happened to want to do it. I wanted children. I wanted to be married. I just didn't grow up thinking that that was the only thing that I could do because of my parents. My parents are Midwestern entrepreneurs. My mom is she's a businesswoman. She's very savvy. She works hard. She was very involved at church. And so my model was that you can do a lot of things. You can even do them at the same time if you want. They're not mutually exclusive. I think my parents, if they had a fault in that, it's that they did the very Gen X thing of they weren't that attentive. They didn't feel like they needed to be. They thought I was at church and I was being safe, and that they didn't need to worry as long as I was there. So they weren't paying attention to the message I was getting, that there was only one way to be and I needed to box myself away. So as I age out, I'm learning, if I want to be accepted, if I want to be safe, if I want to be successful to God, it's not just here on earth, then I have to put all this other away. Everything I want for my life needs to be sacrificed for this one goal. And again, I wanted to be a good girl. I wanted to be very good at being good. And babies seemed like a pretty good reward. Married, happy family seemed like a good reward. And so I wholeheartedly, pursued. I was like, okay, this hurts. It hurts to give up art. It hurts to give up my life, but it's going to be worth it all in the end. And we
My
were
goodness.
singing that. It will be worth it all when we see Jesus. We were singing it all the time. So I bought in.
Was there any place that because I know that you kept this secret, and even the way you described your wedding night, like I
Uh-huh.
remember I was listening to it because I audio listen, and I was in the shower and I was crying. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't even imagine that you went into your wedding night a virgin, doing everything exactly as you are. And
Uh-huh.
you said, I guess this is how I love.
Right.
Well, like being violently
Uh-huh.
assaulted sexually. It was so visceral to experience how desperately you wanted to be the good girl
Uh-huh.
and to be accepted by Jesus and all of that. And as we're starting to see a lot of this politically in
Uh-huh.
play, where skinny is now in again. I think the TikTok videos on the Mar-a-Lago face is kind of hilarious, but
Uh-huh.
there's like an underlying underbelly
Yeah.
of this that you have an interesting perspective on
Yeah.
around the skinny.
Skinny, weak, unable to fight back, very uniform. I call it heroin chic. I mean, they want all women to be demure and tiny and, put up no resistance.
Not take up space.
Don't take up space, don't have a voice, don't be loud, don't be any kind of obstacle to have to contend with. And when you couple that with a lack of education, for example, I had no sex education. My whole goal was to stay a virgin, and I had done that. And one of the things I talk about with the dangers of Christian patriarchy is that when you have in a system where you're giving away your power and you're subjecting your power to someone else, you are entirely dependent on their benevolence. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because not all men are benevolent. And my particular young husband at that time wasn't even that mean spirited. He just was not able to control himself. He didn't know, we had neither one of us language of consent, and he was erratic and disorganized mentally. And so he was not able to meet me at any kind of emotionally mature conversation. He would just do the thing he was feeling so anxious about. And so, language about assault and consent has changed a lot over the past 30 years, but writing that scene really put it down on the page of how violating it was, and also that I had nothing to compare it to. I had nothing other than a hunch that maybe it doesn't always hurt like this, maybe it's not always violent like this. But it wasn't until several days later that I even had when the doctor confirmed that I had been assaulted, which he didn't even use that language. He just, he said my body couldn't handle this much battering. He didn't say you'd been
Ugh.
raped. And so I didn't have that kind of vocabulary. And most new brides don't go to the gynecologist several days later. That alone is something that's unusual. When you take all the education away and all the agency and you hand it over to someone else, and then they aren't able to handle it. I know we talk in our culture right now about tradwives and incels and these the male loneliness epidemic. But if you can imagine today's 21, 22-year-olds who also have so little resource for psychological awareness or bandwidth, and then they're put on all this responsibility is put on their shoulders to be a patriarchal man, they don't have the skills to even carry that load. And now they're going to make their life harder because their partner is now going to be their dependent. Like they're making life as hard as possible with people who can't handle that much responsibility. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine how repressed he must have felt to rage out that way. Like, I noticed that you guys kept changing churches. Like, it just was never settled. He wanted to learn more about the scripture, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing was going his way. And thinking about the loneliness epidemic, I think it's interesting that you use incels in the same breath as tradwives,
Yeah.
where it is like the polar opposite of like having a full expression
Mm-hmm.
of how do you unfold from that? How do you realize that there might be relief somewhere else that doesn't mean relieving yourself on your wife's back or your
Right.
children,
Right. Yeah. I think we just have to keep talking about it so much because one thing I didn't have in the 90s was a movement of people who said, we have tried it this way and this is how it worked out. This is what happened. Today's young people have access to more information, research, testimony, real life evidence than any other generation in humanity, all of civilization. And we have lived this way before. So they can look and they can hear from somebody and they can pick up a book or see a documentary and see, okay, well, that's how this tradwife worked out for them. What am I going to do differently? And sometimes it is learning how to do the more traditional aspects of your life that you really love, but still retaining your agency or still maintaining a partnership with your your co-mate instead of a top-down power structure where you're submitting to him. There's ways to learn from our mistakes in the past. And that's what I hope talking about even the abuse enlightens and leads, because we can't wait for every single person to get broken because life was so hard by the way they set it up. I
Mm.
think all these young tradwives are going to hit the hard. They're going to have the reckoning, but it doesn't have to happen, so late in the game. I almost died in this life. I waited until the last exit on the highway to leave. My hope is that somebody hears it midstream and says, you know what? Actually, I can see where this is going and I need to make some changes right now.
You had said something, and this hit me like a dagger in your book. You said, if I thought about it too long, sadness crawled up my legs like ivy.
Yeah.
Do you hear your story reflected as you share it in private conversations with people that read it? What do you hear out there? What are people's experience?
So it's an interesting, I haven't stopped talking about the book since it came out last August, and I started promoting it in 2020. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it's like, it just keeps getting more timely and more relevant.
So freaking good.
And
Yeah.
it hasn't slowed down the pace. A paperback comes out next February and my second book comes out in May, and the pace has not slowed at all. And so when I started writing the book, I had this reader in mind that was a woman like me who was washing her dishes in the kitchen, who needed to know she wasn't alone. I've heard back from that kind of reader since 2020, since before the book was even finished, because talking about it online always opens space for someone else to share back, me too. And so that affirmation has been with me the whole way. And the more successful the book becomes, the more that circle widens and more people say, I related to it. I was on the same road, but we just, veered off a little differently here and there. Or if I hadn't made this choice, I could have had the same life that you had. Or I did have the same exact life that you had. I have heard from people, wives who've been spanked, families, mothers who've dealt with their children, incestuous children. It's another open secret in quiverfull homes is incest.
What?
These things are, as long as they're never talked about, they are allowed to continue. And so bringing them to light and talking about them neutralizes the shame around it so that you can talk about the practice itself, the structure, the system, the things that prop this up is all exposed through conversation.
I am curious about you specifically.
Mm-hmm.
You have a refreshing voice I have not heard anywhere else. And I don't know how your brain organizes information to like tie things back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so curious about how you consume information and kind of synthesize your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom, your perspective, all
Mm-hmm.
the things that you're learning. I mean, you have to ingest a lot of information and probably a lot of stories. How does your brain do that, Dia?
Well, so that's an interesting question. And I kind of have to go back to how I opened the book with my childhood, because I had a very developed intuition and I silenced it from the time I was 10 to probably 38, 39 years old. silenced my intuition and argued with it and rationalized with it, as women do and as we're socialized to do. So much of my trauma recovery and self-development since has been reconnecting with my intuition. And so that happens all the time when I'm reading and consuming stories, because when I'm taking in, like, for example, since the election, we've had this onslaught of nonstop news. I don't respond to every single thing. I wait until I feel that impulse in my body of like, oh, wait, no, I know what that is. That, like, I need to see the pattern recognition, or I need to see the seed that manifested in the behavior that we're seeing today. I took good notes, and I have receipts in my body and in my experience that remind me of how this happened. I also know, like, there's not a lot of Tias out there who escaped something that was the most extreme manifestation of the patriarchy's vision and then escaped safely, and is also a writer, and then also did her trauma recovery in order to tell the story well. So that's why maybe I'm kind of an outlier that way, but that means I'm willing to work with the material they gave me and tell the damn secrets. I believe in telling the truth of what happened, and I don't want to shine it up. And I do have that personal atonement, because Tradwives are always shining up and doing PR for their family and representing the movement. And I want to atone for the times that I was basically living a lie. So unfiltered, I'll go ahead and say the thing. I'll be blunt. I was always a blurter. And it turns out blurting is very helpful in this line of work.
Yeah.
But connection to intuition and a good memory.
My God. So, speaking of voices, can we talk about the Fundy baby voice?
We sure can.
Holy shit.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, it's all around us all the time. It's all over TikTok. It's all over, it's in our culture. And people don't necessarily realize the way religion takes it and use it. It's not
Can you
solely
explain what it
religious.
is?
Yes. So Fundy baby voice is the secular, it's the cult education term for the baby voice that you will hear in fundamentalist women. So if you're familiar with Michelle Duggar's little
Michelle
baby
Duggar.
voice, she used it on 19 Kids and Counting. If you watched Katie Britt's State of the Union response speech a few years ago, she also used this baby voice, and it like exploded online because everybody was like, why is she whispering like a sexy baby? We've heard Katie Britt speak like a grown-ass woman before, and she's not in this speech. Why is it different? It's the Marilyn Monroe voice. That's just the overlap in Hollywood. It all traces back to the 60s when the feminine mystique came out. A counter book was called Fascinating Womanhood, and it took that baby doll voice and made and spiritualized it. And so the Mormon women, the Mormon community took and went in their direction with it, and then
Yeah.
fundamentalist women and Christian women, Southern women. It's very ubiquitous in our cultures. Girls learn to alter their voice through instruction, but then also through influence, and just you're socialized that way. So it can look like tone policing. Anytime you get loud or let your mature voice show, they'll tone you down. And it can also look like, keep sweet, y'all. You need to be real sweet, and you coax along. And so it's that preschooler prosody that you use to, bring people along. That is what you're supposed to sound like. A childlike, they use the word childlike a lot. And so it's sweet and little girl, and it's not going to confront or threaten anyone. And it's just sweet, and it's just positive, and it's just happy. And we just, socialized to do it. I
But you
didn't
were
even know what I
trained to
sounded like.
undo it. You were trained to undo it. What did that look like?
I decided to stop doing it. So when I got out,
Did you know that this was not your voice?
yeah, because in 2007, when I escaped, I could barely speak. I was stuttered. I could not order pizza. I had too much social anxiety. And then I couldn't not use that voice. That was the way I spoke to my children, to other people, definitely my customer service voice. You hear people say that sometimes. I had no idea what my real matured voice had sounded like. What does Tia as an adult woman sound like? And so part of my trauma therapy was learning how to reconnect with my natural sound. And so I worked with a speech therapist. I also worked with some public speaking coaches, not to become an orator, just to sound like a grown-ass woman in my mature voice. So it's bringing your register into your chest instead of way up here in your head. And it's speaking with an assertiveness that we're supposed to mature into. That's what an actualized grown woman should sound like. Like she has command and presence of her space. But that is very anti-patriarchal. They don't want women sounding like they're in their power. They certainly don't want women preaching. They don't want women telling secrets. They don't, you're not supposed to stand out verbally and vocally.
So I'm wondering how that relates to people in the Republican Party now that are female, that
Mm-hmm.
are in places of power. Carolyn Levitt,
Yeah.
Caroline Levitt,
Caroline.
Megan and Kelly. There's so
Mhm.
many women that are beautiful. You
Mhm.
know, they have the Mar-a-Lago faces, yet I don't see that. So tell me, I know you've got a perspective on
Yeah,
this.
I do.
Heard it, and it was like, holy shit! Oh my god!
It always depends what the goal is. So, women in the patriarchy are always in a support role and they're there to bring along other women. So, somebody like Caroline is supposed to emulate, like, she's what? A 27-year-old baby. She was
Yeah.
raised in patriarchy. And in previous videos, she had a baby voice. She now has a more true to her age voice. Wouldn't necessarily call it empowered because she's a propaganda spewer. But her job is to convince us of the regime. She will never be like there will never be a presidential woman, just like there's not a preacher woman. They're kept to a certain level and it's meant to achieve something. So example, let's go back to Katie Britt. Katie Britt is a senator. There's lots of videos of her speaking in her normal tone of voice when she's doing her job. She has been allowed to do her job as a role model of an example of like, look, we do have women in patriarchy. We do have women on the religious right. But then when she needs to address the nation, they put her in a kitchen. They tell her she needs to, speak like this, and this is how she's going to I'm not doing the example right now,
Wow.
but she speaks in this breathy whisper of earnestness in her kitchen, which is supposed to be warm and feminine and not threatening, instead of the leader that she is been elected to be. So it just really always, it's a manipulation always, and it depends on what they want to achieve. But women are never visible in patriarchy for the woman's sake or her own career or her own ideas. It's always to point and reinforce the system and to bring other women in.
Interesting. And I've heard you talk about the hypersexualization
Hmm.
in the Christian patriarchy. My goodness, I mean, all you need to do is just point to a few things and you
Right.
see it everywhere. What does
Right.
that look like? Like, what
So, well,
can
yeah,
you
it starts
help
with
us?
modesty, right? So, like, modesty seems like a good thing. Let's not tempt the boys with our bodies. So a lot of us were raised with a lot of attention on our bra straps or our hemlines or,
Eye trap.
yeah, exactly. Eye traps. Where's your eye going in your fashion? The Bible actually says that if a man looks at a woman lustfully, he should pluck his eyes out. The Bible doesn't actually say that a girl should cover her body. So that's a white evangelical manifestation
Hmm.
of those puritanical type values. But they're sexual, they're inherently sexual. So when you have a baby, this would happen a lot in the quiverfull families, the mothers would get very anxious if their baby's diaper was showing or they didn't have tights on because they don't want their babies to be immodest. Well, a baby can't be immodest. And if you're putting tights on the baby to keep the baby from being molested, you're already thinking about the
Wow.
baby's sexual parts and someone violating the baby's sexual body parts. Instead of going after the person who might violate the baby, they cover the baby and they're grooming that child, raising that child to think about their body as something that will be and could be violated because it is violated in patriarchy. So like if you're thinking about if a girl's shirt covers her butt, you're thinking about her butt. And so it's constant. The sexual energy and tension is constant because you're always policing people's bodies and sounds and normal development. You got to suppress and compress and tuck away and hide all those scandalous body parts that are part of normal, ordinary development.
Yeah, I've been in sales for a long time. And I remember a couple of years ago, I had a sales call. I was representing a company from somebody that was evangelical Christian, somebody that was trying to bring men back to his faith. And Tia, this was such a crazy story. I've never said it out loud on the show, but he came on and he was really like cagey with me. And he said, Allison, I was going to cancel having this call with you. And I said, "Okay, why?" And he said, "Because I saw your picture and your shoulders were showing. It didn't look professional." And I was wearing like a sequined top or something, and I'm
Hmm.
also not like an overtly Christian. Like I was raised Christian, but whatever, but it wasn't like my boobs were popping out.
Hmm.
And he thought, well, the company that you represent, I think it is some type of, like, I think he called me a honeypot that I was going to attract to lure people in. And so
Mm.
he immediately started asking me like, "Hey, if I sign up for this, do you get money?" And I had to it was I was so caught off guard and I was
Yeah.
so mad that I did not put him in his place. because I was
Mhm.
representing another company and at the time. And I was so upset that he was able to tell me what I should do, but I wasn't able to tell him that he was a complete fuckhead,
Right.
and
Right.
how do you bring people to Christ already judging me? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
before I even opened my mouth because of a picture he saw, my profile picture looked
Yeah.
too provocative for him. And so
Mhm.
I just like, obviously there's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum that people fall on. And I think about like, where are we going as a society? Is there any way to move forward when I feel like it feels like the Christian driven mission,
Mhm.
right, has been personified somehow by the least Christian man on earth, Donald Trump. Like
Mhm.
he's dismantling our freedoms at warp speed.
Mhm.
What actions can we possibly take? It feels like it's going in the wrong direction
Yeah.
at such a fast pace where it really does feel like we're losing our voice, we're losing our freedoms, we're losing our rights.
Mhm.
My daughter, I fear for her because
Right.
she will not be protected like you and I were
Right.
our entire, reproductive life. I
Right.
mean, protected by the law,
Right.
maybe not
Right.
by people around us.
Oh, I think a lot of things. Number one, I'm sorry that happened to you because that's such a blurring of sexual creepiness and professionalism. Like that should have never been a part of a thing, but that's a great example of how they make it weird and they make it sexual when there's no need for that. There's something in that, like bringing up a woman's body parts is not appropriate. And they are the ones who made that not appropriate. Where we go from here and this pace, like, so where I sit a lot is how it feels versus how it is. So they're manipulators and they are, this whole breaking news cycle is designed to break us. That's what breaking news does, is it breaks you. They know this. And so they go, 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 go. And this relentless pace is designed to, to do this thing. It's going to feel like the end is nigh because that's what they want. They know how to generate the response that they want. When we sit back and sit down, it's not as bad as it feels. And I think that from day to day, that's where I take my hope of
What do
we
you mean?
still, yep, we still have a
Help me
judicial system.
understand.
We do.
Help us
We
understand.
still have a judicial system. We still have to actually, ironically, take a little comfort in the fact that we're divided and we have two very different information feeds.
Why?
Because I know it's weird, but but this is what I do when I'm very hopeless over where we're going and how quickly we're getting there. I go talk to MAGA people and I listen to it from their point of view, and I realize how siloed away they are by information and by cult of personality and by mind control. And I realize that as long as the reality is not getting in there, like there's that much division, that there's safety in that. The point, I hope I can make this because this is really the first time I've talked about this that publicly, but when we're in deep shit, there's no division because there's so much unity in the evil,
Mm,
in the
like
patriarchy.
9/11
Exactly.
feels like that. Right.
We're surrounded and immersed, and their laws have changed, and there's no resistance, and there's no protesting, and everybody has normalized and accepted it. That is not what's happening. What we have right now is we have a lot of people who are emotionally struggling because they can't normalize it. And when they connect with people, they're speaking overtly. We are putting this out on the internet because we can. The people, the MAGA people might not hear it and reach it, but we still have this freedom to do this. And the fact that there's this division into camps and there's not a lot of bleed over means that there's not a lot of bleed over. They're a little minority because they do not have the same numbers that we have. That's another place of hope I take. Has not overcome so thoroughly that there's no place that they reach. And so I go to the places where they haven't reached. Like I go see people who need friends. I go see communities that are still trying to be vocal and talk about it. I try to engage with MAGA people. It's hard when they're in the
How do you
cult.
do that? Like, what does that look like?
I ask questions. I say, "What do you think about?"
Like, to who? In, like, a forum, like an online forum, or you're going
A
to
lot of it's one-on-one because I live in the South, so
uh-huh.
I'll interact with MAGAs or online, because I'm online a lot. I'm chronically online for my works. Or I'll go into their hashtags and I'll listen to their actual content. I'll respect their humanity and their intelligence. I remember
You are
being
very empathetic.
a
You are
Tradwife.
very
I
empathetic.
try to be. That's kind of like my natural superpower, but I remember what it was like to be a Tradwife and how smart and resourceful we actually are. So I will mirror back like I'll do this with young Tradwives and I'll say, "You are so resourceful and smart and you're almost here. Can I tell you, here's a reality of what how that manifested for me. Some of it's evangelism techniques used against them because it's each one reach one. It's like go affirm someone's humanity, and then what happens is they are willing to listen, and you can like get their little wheels turning. Like I'll say, well, what do you think about the fact that people arrived on horseback in a park yesterday with weapons that are not legal on the street? And these are gun owners who really pay attention to what's legal on the street.
Mm.
And even they're like, well, hold on a second, like I couldn't go do that. Why are these people allowed to go do it? And that's all we have to do. We're not responsible to change anybody's mind, but we can crack their facades all over the place. I just find a lot of hope and power in being able to do that. People received me when I came out of a cult, and I want to do the same thing. I know there's a lot of anger towards people like that. And they're like, oh, they got to be accountable, and, that we got to, really stick it to them. That's not how cults break. Waking up from the cult control, you come out with baby steps, and it's tender. And if you think you're going to get your head cut off, you're not going to speak up. We have to, our work is being receptive and allowing some grace for them to change their minds.
I'm wondering about you specifically. You're very
Uh-huh.
vocal and I mean, you analyzed a lot of data. You have a lot of perspectives that you share very boldly.
Uh-huh.
What does blowback look like for you?
Knock on wood, I don't get very much, and I don't know
Ah,
why. I don't know why. I don't think
were
of
you
it as
scared?
bold. No,
Were you
no.
scared to speak out?
No, I have already faced down all those fears. And I told you,
Yeah.
like, when we first got connected today about the legal read, my editors have taken very good care of me to make sure that my book is totally
Can you explain that? 'Cause
verifiable.
that was really powerful.
What's that?
Can you explain what the legal read is?
Oh,
Because that I
yeah.
never even knew that existed. That's really powerful.
So when you have a controversial book going to press, the publishing house will provide a legal editor, and the legal editor goes line by line, claim by claim, and makes sure that everything is tight, that you are not making a claim against somebody that cannot be verified. You have to have a receipt and a piece of evidence for every single thing that you say. And if you don't, then you need to change how you say it. They don't want us to be, like in defamation suits and slander and things
Yeah.
like that. So they make sure that everything is really tight, that your fair use is actual fair use. And for me, that just gave me a ton of confidence to know that I can stand by every single thing that's in that book because we went over it and a team of professionals went over it. And the bad guys know that we went over it too, because the burden of proof for a defamation suit is that it's not true and that you intended to hurt them with it. Nothing in my book intends to hurt people, and I use their own words and their own materials and their own, their own receipts is my evidence in the stories. Um, I think that is all like just such a gift, to somebody who is bold, as you say. I mean, you don't think of it as bold. To me, it's just always obvious when I'm making posts and I'm pointing these things out in my slides and reels and things. I usually have to have an argument with myself of if it's valuable or not, because to me, it's like, well, everybody knows that. That is so obvious. And then I'll realize, no, people aren't seeing it the way I'm seeing it. It's not obvious to them. So they let me make the content, and then I make it, and then they're having their epiphanies and their light bulbs are going off. But I'm amazed at that. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that would be so helpful. So, all I can say is I was a bold and outspoken child who was shamed into silence. And
Mm.
now I'm just myself, and it seems to be resonating. And that's amazing.
Do you feel like you are supported by God, the universe? I don't know what your relationship is now.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you call it spiritually private, which I love. But do you feel like you are supported by a higher power?
So mystery in the universe, I feel caught by other people, by energies I can't explain. I've definitely had a lot of supernatural type manifestations that I don't have words and language for. I am very careful about labels and boxes and names, and that's why I protect my spiritual privacy, because it's very fluid. Another part of that explanation is that I will always be a people pleaser. So when I'm speaking to people who are Christians, they want to hear that I'm still a Christian. And that word is really changing meaning right now. So I would be careful with it anyway. Atheists want to hear that I'll have nothing to do with God. And as the people pleaser, I'm thinking, what do they want to hear so that they'll like me? I really want to be liked today. So what can I say? And so I have to be aware, just for my own personal accountability, that I need to protect my privacy. Also, younger me, little girl me, who should have had that privacy in the first place, to not decide her spiritual beliefs for the rest of her life before she even knew who she was as a child.
That's so wild.
Yeah, I need to protect that privacy for her. But what that means for like my spirituality, I mean, I think it's pretty evident. Anybody who knows me or listens to me for any length of time, I credit the universe, I credit mystery, I credit the love and support of other people. And I do think we're all connected and related. And I prefer deities that I can't explain. I want a God of
Hmm.
mystery. I don't want a God that I can solve with a catechism and answer every question. That is not spiritually mystical or amazing to me.
Hmm.
It's not interesting. It's kind of boring. It's really boring to be a fundamentalist, I can tell you. They have an answer for everything.
How do you discern your intuition from programming, conditioning, grooming? How do you discern?
Oh, that's a great question. No one's asked me that before. Wow, I love that question because I did speak about intuition, and intuition is a lot of body response, and body response can be very somatically impacted by trauma. I'm always doing my trauma work every day, and I do have to have like that conversation of like, is this a trauma response? What is reacting in me? I do spend a lot of time like in that analysis of where something is coming from and to what end do I want to speak about it, or is it too dangerous to speak about it, and why? If so, why? Like there are some issues I don't get involved in because I'm not the person that needs to speak to them. But I
Hmm.
can go elevate somebody else who's speaking about them, that's maybe more appropriate to speak on that issue. And that's been very rewarding to elevate and amplify other voices. Knowing the difference, I mean, it's kind of hard to put into language because I just know a good feeling versus a bad feeling. I know an energy that makes me happy and an energy that makes me want to hole up and be sad and tired. Like you quoted the sadness up my legs like ivy. I mean, I feel like sadness roots me in place and paralyzes me. So I know that if
Hmm.
something's doing that, that's not for me. And there's a red flag and I need to look at what's going on there versus something that makes me want to fly and be on fire and talk about and I'm not afraid, then I'll go towards that energy with an open heart.
It's so interesting because before we were recording, I asked you, Tia, do you ever get tired of talking about cults? And you're like, no, I don't. But I get tired of hearing how many people are tangled up in it. And
Mhm.
I imagine I speak for my audience and for the listener out there who also shares a narrowing capacity for the chaos that is the news and out there. Like there
Mhm.
just is no escape. There's no escape from Donald Trump, from holy shit, can you believe what he's doing now?
Right.
And are we gonna be okay? Are we gonna be okay with the tariffs? Are we gonna be okay with Alcatraz, like the alligator Alcatraz thing? Are we gonna be okay
Mhm.
with everything that's going on in the world right now, with our rights being taken away, with Medicaid, with all of these? I don't know how to, like I am cognizant and discerning that I'll listen to voices like yours that
Mhm.
give me data and
Mhm.
give me analysis and give me hope
Mhm.
because I can't, like, I wish I could bury my head in the sand, but I'm just not built that way,
Right.
And again, I live in a world of reinvention and
Mhm.
in a world that I deeply care about our changing culture and being part of the change.
Mhm.
So, what advice would you give for the person that's listening
Mhm.
that is struggling, that is just too fucking much.
Yeah.
But you also don't wanna sit back and watch the world burn either.
Yeah. Right. So I would say don't. I would say if it's too much to accept, don't accept it. I don't think we're going to be okay with that stuff. I think we have to keep resisting that stuff, the concentration camps and the bad laws that compromise women. I don't think we can be a thriving society and have those things be true. And so what we have to do is refuse to normalize them and continue resisting in whatever way the universe puts before us to resist. We can't all do the same things the same way, but we have our own special way. Like there will be a conversation with a family member, or there will be a phone call you can make to a senator, or some action step that if you go looking for it, way will lead to way, and you will find your action steps. I do a lot of recalibration and titrating and pacing myself. So when
Mm.
something is a water hose and I know that the source wants it to be a water source, a water hose to wear me out, I put the stops on them and I say, nope, this is a boundary. You do not get to overwhelm me with the news. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to pick one thing that I can access, or I'm going to take a break because I'm allowed to rest. Rest can be resistance too. I can determine to be happy today because happiness and joy in a fundamentalist society is a rebellion. They hate it when you're happy. They hate it when you're like pursuing something that gives you bliss, and because it's contagious and it makes you harder to control. And so they
What
don't
is
like
that?
that.
But how is that shown up in the Christian fundamentalist faith? Like, what does
Yeah.
that look like?
That looks like them taking away everything that's fun. They spoil all the fun. They put everybody in
Why?
boxes. Why? Because it's controllable. They ban all the books. They ban all the fun movies. They don't let you dance. They take away good foods. They take away things that just are rest. They increase your work. They take away, the wealth that you might accrue from that work. They do everything they can to make it tiny and tedious and rote. And then they tell you it's spiritual. You're more like Jesus if you suffer. And so you
Mm.
just accept your pain and suffering, and you go on with this very joyless way of living. If you listen to fundamentalist kids who come out of Christian fundamentalism, they talk about joyless childhoods. They're put to work at a really young age. They're not allowed to have any fun. They're not allowed to be teenagers. They're not allowed to have peers and good memories that are just age appropriate. And so that's the way that fundamentalism takes anything that's joyful and ruins it. So in our current day, if we are embracing joy, and sharing joy and posting about things that make us happy, truly happy, not toxically positive. We're not trying to gaslight anybody or whitewash
Right.
anything. We are trying to be truly happy. It is a rebellion against their high control. They can't handle it. It'll make them mad, and making them mad can also be its own source of joy. One thing I do to help diffuse their power is I refer to every patriarch with an E at the end. So they're a baby, so Mikey Johnson and Dougie Wilson and Petey Hegseth.
Does
And
that help
it
in
helps
real life
diminish
or
it.
does
It
it help
brings
you?
them it brings them down to size in my imagination, which is where all the fear is. So then I'm just not as afraid. I mean, Petey Hegseth cannot even communicate in a private channel, and he cannot go a day without a drink. He does not get to be as scary as my nervous system might like to make him, because I know
Wow.
Pete Hegseth is tied to Doug Wilson, and I know that they want to spank women and take away our vote. That's very scary to me if I look at it that way. But if I
Yeah.
diminish him and bring him down to size, I can go on with my day, and in my own special way, chip away at what they're working on. So,
And I wonder if that's what Trump is doing because he is so good at the
mhm,
nicknames, right?
yeah,
He's
yeah.
taking a page from Tia's book.
He knocks everybody off at the knees. He makes everybody feel small, and his is mean spirited. He's not doing it to diminish fear. He's doing it to make people feel worthless, so they won't have anything to fight back with.
Wow.
So, yeah.
All of this has been you are an incredible, incredible woman. How do people get your books, talk to you, find you?
It's easy. I'm everywhere. A well-trained wife is available anywhere books are sold.
It's so good.
TiaLevings.com is my website. I'm on all the social platforms at Tia Levings Writer. And I break this down on the daily somewhere, somehow, between Substack, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Threads. I'm everywhere. So, and the new book comes out in May. And I can't say the title yet because it just got retitled and recovered. So we're releasing it
I
soon.
I like that you're changing the title
Uh
because I
huh.
felt like I don't know what it is, but I felt
Right.
like it doesn't have the weight of who you are, like the
This is
soul
the
of healing.
universal feedback and how we know that it was a good decision, because the
Yeah.
other title was The Soul of Healing, and it's a nice title. It just doesn't mean anything, and it isn't
Yeah.
tied to a well-trained wife the way that the book that follows up with recovery, how to recover from high control, should be tied to my first book. So I'm very excited to release it when it comes out. But everybody's been giving us the exact same feedback. So I'm like, I'm so glad.
Isn't that
I'm so
funny? Well, can
glad.
I have you back on the
Yes,
show
you
when you're
can.
getting ready to promote it? Because I am ready for it, and I will have everything in the show notes. But Tia, thank you so
Hmm.
much for your courage and your bravery. And I don't know if you are really as prolific because I read all your stuff, and
Hmm.
you're a freaking writer. Like you're just cranking out stuff. But it isn't fluff. It really, really is powerful. It's meaningful. It is culture changing. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being a guest with us and hanging out in the Reinvent Your Room.
Thank you so much.